Hi, Martha. We've had an email.
Yeah, it's from Brian, James. He says, I used to get my daily Trump fix from the likes of Seth Meyers, Stephen Colbert, and Jimmy Kimmel, but my dealers are now Mark, Martha, and James. It does beg the question who's who
Maybe it means we'll get an in-house band and a studio audience.
and a pay rise.
That'll be right. I'm James Matthews,
I'm Martha Kelner.
and on day 19 of Trump 100, why Donald Trump wants to make America Christian again.
And how Elon Musk's move fast and break things approach is rocking Washington, D.C.
So, Martha, let's start with Donald Trump's announcement this morning that he wants to root out anti-Christian bias, as he sees it, in the United States.
Yeah, he was saying this at the National Prayer Breakfast, right? What exactly is the National Prayer Breakfast?
Well, it's a swanky event, Martha. It happens every year in the Hilton's International Ballroom. Basically a networking event for religious, political, and business types. And every president since Eisenhower has spoken there. Trump, as we've become used to, covered quite a few topics in his speech. That included what he sees as his greatest successes from the first few weeks in office. But he also said this.
I will be creating a brand new presidential commission on religious liberty. It's going to be a very big deal, which will work tirelessly to uphold this most fundamental right. Unfortunately, in recent years, we've seen this sacred liberty threatened like never before in American history. There's nothing happened like the last 4 years. What's happened with so many things have gone bad, but religion, what they've done, and the persecution that they've executed have been just horrible.
Trump also said he would make Attorney General Pam Bondi the head of a task force to eradicate anti-Christian bias in the US.
I've got a feeling all this might surprise some people, James, because is Trump even a particularly religious guy?
Well, I think it depends who's standing in front of him. He was raised Presbyterian, Scottish mother, of course. And, he's talked a lot about that in his first term, particularly. He appears, though, to have had a road to Damascus moment after the assassination attempt in Butler. Since then, he's talked a lot more about faith, has repeatedly said he feels he was saved by God on that day for a reason. In fact, at the prayer breakfast, he said he felt more strongly about God after Butler.
And it's played well for him politically, hasn't it?
Yeah, amongst a section of voters, religion plays a significant role in their politics. About 3/4 of all Americans say that they are religious. That's according to a recent Gallup poll. Nearly 70% of them were Christian. Something you heard a lot, as you know, Martha, on the campaign trail, was people saying they were voting for Trump because they believed he stood for their Christian values. You'd see people at rallies wearing red caps. Jesus is my savior. Trump is my president.
Yeah, and I think it's even more so been a factor in the last election cycle, given the assault on abortion rights and Donald Trump toing and froing on exactly where he stands on that. But it's not a new thing, is it, religion playing a role in US politics?
No, politicians here, especially on the right, have long leaned into religion, but the abortion issue, that's perhaps brought it to the fore in recent years.
So, given all that support from the Christian right, is Trump's announcement a way of paying back that support in a way?
I think so, certainly when it comes to the evangelical right. I mean, that's a constituency that has a relationship of mutual benefit with Donald Trump. For evangelicals, it's not necessarily his religious principles or adherence that matters. What matters to them is what they get in return, a president who embraces the agenda. Look at conservative judges on the Supreme Court, legislation, anti-LGBTQ, anti-trans, and abortion as well, although Trump, as we know, is equivocal on that. Evangelicals are important to Trump in terms of the numbers game. As the traditional Republican demographic has shrunk, the religious right has become a component increasingly important to him. And there is this quid pro quo. The reason I think many are asking is how far does that extend? Right now, we have a man by the name of Russell Vought. He's being lined up as Trump's budget chief. He's a white Christian nationalist, controversial. Once he described Muslims as condemned. He once discussed prioritizing Christian immigrants over other face. He was also one of the architects of Project 2025.
Why do the Democrats call him the most dangerous nominee?
Because he's out there in terms of religion and in terms of the hardline far-right politics of Project 25, not a voice that Democrats want to have in Donald Trump's ear. And the question is, once he's in government, what ability does he have to make change along the lines of, extremist principles that he has embraced quite openly? And that's before you get to the likes of Michael Flynn and Roger Stone, these other individuals in Trump's orbit who have embraced Christian nationalism in quite an incendiary way. I think Flynn, for example, talks about America being in the midst of spiritual warfare. So many questions being asked by Trump critics about the religious right, its influence on Trump, and how, in a position of authority inside government, they can reshape the country from a position of power. Tell you what, Martha, there's something else I wanted to play for you from Donald Trump at this prayer breakfast. Have a listen to this.
And I have great respect for the people that are doing it. Elon Musk is helping us on it, and he's pretty good. He's pretty good at it. But
Elon Musk, Martha, the first buddy.
Yeah, it seems like that relationship's going strong. I remember going to a SpaceX launch a couple of weeks after the election. They were best buddies at that point. Musk had given the Trump campaign $250 million during the election. He was spending a lot of time in Mar-a-Lago. Trump then seemed to be sort of repaying the favour by going to support Musk's endeavours at this launch with his son, Don Trump Jr. His granddaughter was there as well. There were a couple of questions that I and everyone else was being asked at the time. One was, how long will this relationship last? Well, the answer a few months in is it's going pretty well. All positive noise, as it seems, from Donald Trump about Musk, both publicly and privately, apparently. And the second question was, how much power will Musk have, given that he is an unelected official? Well, I mean, the answer to that is completely obvious. A huge amount of power, largely unchecked, and he is, I would say, the most powerful unelected official in the history of this country, running the Department of Government Efficiency, consolidating control over large swathes of federal government, and all of this, it seems, with Donald Trump's blessing.
Yeah, on the face of it, it's all part of a job to reduce waste within the federal government, right?
Yeah, I mean, written down a pretty noble aim. DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, says that their main purpose is to cut government waste and reduce government regulation. And in fact, just this week, Musk was saying that the best case scenario would be to make $2 trillion in cuts to federal spending. There are a lot of people in America who will hear that and think, fantastic, that sounds great. Caroline Leavitt, Donald Trump's press secretary, made a direct link between cutting spending via the US Agency of International Development, that's USAID, and the federal government having more money for things like disaster recovery here in Los Angeles or in the areas of North Carolina that were devastated by Hurricane Helene at the end of last year. There are plenty of people who will hear that as well and think, brilliant. The practicalities, though, are still not clear, are they? So USAID accounts for 1% of federal funding, around $38 billion the last fiscal year. So there are still big cuts to be made elsewhere.
Yeah, and Musk, essentially, he's taken a scythe to large parts of the federal government to try to reach his target.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that you can't criticize Elon Musk for is his work rate. He is relentless. He's so busy, in fact. He's now got a bed in his office at DOGE.
Wow.
He did a similar thing on the factory floor at Tesla. He had a bed as well under his desk at Twitter in San Francisco, in the offices there. Elon Musk understands that this is part of his MO, move fast and break things. In the last week alone, he and his team at DOGE have moved to dismantle USAID. They've made redundancy offers to tens of thousands of government employees, and they've gained access to some of the federal government's most sensitive payment systems. They're doing a lot.
I tell you, watching Elon Musk swaggering around Washington, D.C. at the moment does contrast with a day many months ago when we doorstepped him. Musk, because he had to, was in a Tesla like Beetle. and he was wedged into this thing with his two security guys in the back. This didn't say very much, but a different picture, different guy, different power this time.
I wonder how much has changed behind the scenes in terms of his security, because as we keep reflecting upon, he is, still an unelected official. So presumably, is paying for all of that himself, but now has a much more high profile role than he ever did.
And that is the question. I mean, it's certainly high profile, but what about the power? Donald Trump is making the case, and when asked, will say, well, he's reporting to me. How long does that coexistence last? And given the tentacles that Elon Musk and these young whiz kids that are all over social security payments, CIA details, big lots of secret information. If and when it does all go wrong, what happens to that information? What happens to a nation's secrets, a population's secrets, private details? This is a businessman. And that kind of knowledge is power. So if it does all go wrong, where is everybody left then?
And the people who are trying to stop access to these sensitive payment systems, security officials within these federal organisations, if they make a stand, they're being immediately put on administrative leave. So people in impossible positions, to stand up to Elon Musk.
Yeah. And people are worried. And they're angry as well, aren't they?
Yeah, there are people who are angry and upset, and there is a level of resistance. There's not really until this week been any organised resistance, though, from the Democratic Party. And then the matriarch of the party, Senator Elizabeth Warren, suddenly put her head above the parapet. She sent a letter to Trump's new Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, on Sunday to demand answers for his role in allowing Musk's team to access the federal payment system. Referring to Musk as the co-president, she warned he was taking a wrecking ball to government. So it does seem that there is now some form of uprising. And it's funny, isn't it? The sudden Democratic Party resistance movement is focused not on Donald Trump, but on Elon Musk. And it was Elon Musk's name who was on all the placards of the protests outside USAID this week, wasn't it, James?
Yeah, he's the high-profile agent of change. He's certainly the subject and the focus of gatherings we've seen here in DC, Martha, in the last couple of days. There have been crowds, federal workers, activists among them, chants of deport Musk.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess at the root of this is how long Musk survives in Donald Trump's government, because, there is this uneasy power balance between them, Musk ultimately owing his position to Trump. But we saw in Donald Trump's last term in office how quickly he can turn on his friends.
Yeah, he's been offered the Lincoln bedroom in the White House. I wonder if he'll be shown the door before too long. We'll see. But right now, I mean, to be fair, they seem to be a unit working hand in glove. Anyway, Martha, we're at the part of the podcast that we like to call Any Other Business, which is usually quite a lot. But Martha, Trump's plans to move migrants to Guantanamo Bay, they're continuing apace, yeah?
They certainly are, James. The aspiration stated by the Trump administration was for Gitmo, Guantanamo Bay, eventually to accommodate 30,000 migrants. The first planes already arriving to bring detainees there. 10 were on the first flight, 13 on the second flight, with more to come in the coming days. The 13 that arrived on a flight today are, according to the Department of Homeland Security, suspected Venezuelan gang members, and they're going to be put in cells that were used to detain Al-Qaeda terrorists. So that's one part of the naval base. And then at the other side of the naval base, springing up just now is a tent encampment, which is for other migrants, but we don't know whether those migrants will be just people who were here in the United States illegally or whether they're suspected of other crimes. So still a huge amount of unknowns. Yeah, thousands of asylum seekers, as I'm sure people will remember, had their appointments with immigration inspectors cancelled the very day of Donald Trump's inauguration. And keen listeners to Trump 100 may remember that day I was on the southern border between the town of Eagle Pass in Texas and Piedra Negra in Mexico. I spoke that day to a woman named Erica in a migrant shelter in Piedra Negra. She was in tears, begging the president to find a conscience and reconsider her application. I've kept in touch with her. I spoke to her today, actually. She's still living at that shelter. And today, February 6th, is a particularly difficult day because this is when she was supposed to have her meeting with immigration officials, the day she dreamed she'd be granted access to the US. So she said she'd been incredibly upset.
And what plans does she have now?
Well, that's exactly what I asked her, because her life in Mexico is now kind of aimless. She says she's just waiting every day and praying to God that something will happen, that President Trump will change his mind. And I asked if going back to Guatemala was an option. Well, she says it's not. The reason that she left originally was the father of her oldest child, who was in prison for rape, had been released and was threatening her life. So that hasn't changed. She still doesn't feel safe going back there. So while the whole world has moved on, while there have been monumental shifts in US government, for her, she's living a day-to-day life with no purpose, really.
Yeah, quite a story, Martha, and typical of so many others, I would imagine. Moving on, the new UK ambassador to the United States, Peter Mandelson, he's touched down in DC today. Didn't quite have the start he might have wanted. Reportedly told a journalist when asked about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein to F off. I wonder if he's been taking Donald Trump lessons before he got here. He's due to start in the job on Monday. The bosses will be hoping he can build bridges with Team Trump and exempt British goods, of course, from the global tariffs the new president has threatened to impose. Priority number one. We'll be talking much more about Mandy, I'm sure, in the weeks to come, Martha.
Yeah, I hope he doesn't tell you to F off, James.
Yeah, do you want to put money on it? All right, that's it for today. Before we go, a reminder to send us your questions about Trump and Gaza, about his plans for the US government, tariffs, anything you want to know. Ask, and we'll do our best to answer them in Sunday's Q&A episode.
You can email us as ever on trump100@sky.uk. And if you don't already, please do follow Trump 100 wherever you're listening.
Many thanks for joining us on day 19 of Trump 100. See you tomorrow for day 20.
See you then.
Before we go, though, I want to tell you the story, the best story I've heard this week. We have Tor, a producer from London, who's joining us in the Washington Bureau for the week. If I said to you, in terms of TV series, have you seen The Prisoner?
No.
Man in a Suitcase?
No, I don't think so.
The Benny Hill Show?
Yes.
Music for all these shows was composed by Albert Elms, who is the grandfather of Tor Elms, our colleague. And
that is a good story.
It is. The best thing about it is every now and again, a royalty check will arrive at the family home, 20 quid.
That's lovely. What a nice story. Not Paul McCartney money, but it's still nice.
She wouldn't be working with us if it was Paul McCartney money.